Welcome, folks. We're at Soundplex Studios. This is Local Lens Broadcasting, where we put a spotlight on culture, folks like the one you'll meet today, and businesses that want to kind of get their story out there in the Philadelphia region. So we're kind of that vehicle. So today we're with someone pretty special. I've known her for maybe almost a year now. Her name's Denise Brough of TooMushLove, and we're going to talk about a very interesting subject, which is psychedelics, but not just as most folks would think of recreationally, but this is more on the therapeutic side because now they're finding psychedelics are very beneficial therapeutically. So we're going to have a three-part series. This is part number one. I'm going to talk to Denise. I'm going to have her give us a little bit of a background so she can tell you a little bit about what she's all about and why she's in this business. And then we're going to get into some Q&A on particular topics that are very interesting, especially this day and age, because everyone, if you're out there in the news and you're seeing stuff about psychedelics, you're going to find it's going to be more commonplace because it's some revolutionary approaches to medicine that you'll find very interesting. So without further ado, I want to introduce you to Denise Brough, and she was TooMushLove. So I'm going to have her introduce herself and tell a little about you and your business and why you are doing this, which is interesting.
All right, thanks, George. So I started this business about 5 years ago for personal reasons. I worked in large-scale construction, loved it. Had a hip replacement from heavy sports and just went all wrong. So I was sidelined. I couldn't go back to what I loved. I was at a checkup at a doctor. She asked me how I was. I burst into tears. I was very depressed. She put me on Zoloft, an antidepressant. I was very bothered because she didn't ask me any questions. There was no balance. There was no, are you self-medicating? Are you getting out of your house? Are you showering? Are you exercising? So I started researching. I had never done a psychedelic in my life. I was about 52 years old, something like that. And I just kept researching and it just kept coming up. And I knew nothing about it. So I just flew to Mexico and I did a lot of psychedelics. And it changed my life. And
Wow, that's
people
cool.
noticed, and it just went from there.
That's awesome. So that's interesting that traditional medicine is obviously going to write a script for pharma. That's what they do. And that's what they're motivated to do. That's what they're trained to do. But now you saw it upon yourself to take a different tact. And you did these psychedelics down in Mexico. And what was the response for you personally? What did that experience, what was the experience like? And was there anything that was a surprise to you, or was it pretty organic how it helped with your issue? Tell us a little bit about that experience.
Well, I was terrified. And my friends thought I was nuts because I just picked up and left. And they're like, "Where are you? I need a longitude and a latitude." It was a whole new world for me. But it was awesome. I learned a lot. Standard medicine is to treat a symptom, not heal. Psychedelics heal. And that's, I think, what became very aware to me. The other thing that I became very aware of, especially watching other people, is we all have trauma. A lot of us know our trauma. We think we've dealt with our trauma, but it's almost like it's attached to us. Psychedelics helps it leave and be behind us instead of always right here. And it's really lovely to see with people that they can, again, a lot of people know what their trauma is, but it still is affecting their everyday life. And this gives you the opportunity to put it behind you.
Yeah, and what's very cool about this in this day and age, because there's a lot more awareness about it, is that people are starting to really investigate it for themselves because the traditional methods aren't working, and it's actually making things worse. So why not take a fresh approach to it, which you're doing and you're helping people do. So let's get into your business. TooMushLove, how long you been in business? What is the model for your business? And then we'll get into some nitty gritty questions and really educate the folks out there that want to know more about these psychedelics. And I also want to mention, we're also going to talk about an event we're having here at Soundplex Studios on March 5th, which is kind of an open forum. We invite guests here, and Denise and I will have a Q&A just like this, and people can ask questions of us. We'll have some collateral material that we'll give out, and then we'll talk more about the actual sessions themselves and how they can be very beneficial for everyone. So tell us about the business itself and what that's like and what it's designed to do.
So when I first started, I primarily did retreats in Mexico. I found a retreat center, and that is because it's legal there, so you can do anything you want. But as time went on, a lot of people can't afford to go away for a week. A lot of people can't take the time. So I started doing a lot more work here. So basically at TooMushLove, we do retreats. We do week-long retreats. We do weekend retreats. And we do one-on-one sessions. We do group sessions. And that's with psilocybin, which is magic mushroom, 5-MeO-DMT or bufo. And also we work with MDMA. The other side of it is microdosing, and the two, I know we're going to get into that, the two do two different things. So those are basically what we do at TooMushLove.
That's awesome. So I have some questions for you, and they're general questions, and obviously we're going to be putting this on Patreon, our Patreon channel, so folks, you can see it there. But also we'll send out some clips to promote our event on March 5th, which anything goes, and we'll actually have some folks here that had experiences with each and every one of those medications. So questions for you. What conditions have you seen plant medicines help with the most? Depression, PTSD, anxiety, any others that you see from a standpoint of your clients that are coming to you for issues with, and what do you see, what's most common?
Well, most people come for mental health, depression, anxiety. PTSD is a huge one. I deal a lot with veterans. And another big one, which is really coming to light, TBI, traumatic brain injury. And that's dealing with, you deal with a lot of veterans with that from explosions. You deal with people that have had bad falls, athletes being hit repeatedly. So that's a big one that I've seen huge success. Migraines, we do know about a client of mine who does not have migraines anymore. He had them for 40 years. So all of it, I'd say all of it. I just have people come to me with all of it.
That's awesome. And what do you believe psychedelics are finally, or why do you believe psychedelics are finally gaining credibility in the therapeutic world? Because now in New Jersey, where we're located, they're moving towards legalizing psychedelics as a means of therapy, and they'll start opening up clinics. Now, obviously, the government's going to be involved. There'll be some restrictions, specific diagnoses. It wouldn't be open for everyone, but why do you think all of a sudden New Jersey and some of these other states like Denver or Colorado and even Massachusetts are now seeing it as this is a necessary step for them if they want to embrace things that really actually help people?
I think what really started the push is PTSD in veterans, because that's been behind the scenes for the past 10 years of trying to get help for people. The suicide rate is outrageous. So I think that was really the initial push. And the other thing is standard therapy, the saying in psychedelics is one psychedelic session is like 5 years of therapy. So it's just getting you to where you want to go much faster, because in that 5-year period, you lose a lot of people.
Yeah, and that's what's interesting about what you do, because it's not just a matter of taking the actual psychedelic, but it's all about preparing for that psychedelic. Why are you doing it? Then doing it, and then afterwards, what are we getting out of it? And that integration part, and so on. So can you explain the role, and this is kind of ties in on the PTSD, is neuroplasticity and how psilocybin affects the brain long after the journey ends?
So neuroplasticity is the opportunity for the neurons in the brain to change, which sounded a little crazy to me at first. But when you do a psychedelic, it just rewires the brain. So with that, it gives opportunity for change, because you're like, well, how can change be possible? Because now you're thinking in a different pattern. So when you do a session, you go in with an intention. Where do I want to be after this? What am I looking for? And that really sends the brain in that direction. So that is, neuroplasticity is a really hard thing to understand, but that is the key to why there is change.
Yeah, and I think, and I always kind of go back to our ancestors who were free to use these plants back in the day, whether it was fungi or some other mechanism where they experimented. And folks, were way more in touch with nature, way more connected to the universe, more or less. And probably didn't have the hang-ups that we have today because of the society we live in. We're all kind of living in these silos. We were brainwashed to believe this and that on the news or the internet or where we're getting that stuff. But in order to function in this world, the corporate world, and have a job and stuff, you have to kind of be in that framework of, it's kind of regimented. Whereas before, we were hunter-gatherers, it was a little bit more laid back, and we're experimenting with these things. But, there's a lot of, news about there, or stories about even psychedelics as being a mechanism where it was part of evolution. How we got smarter, how our brain developed, and it needed these types of mechanisms to do that, which is interesting, and it accelerated the human mind. And now we're coming back to it, which I think is great, because I think we need a fresh look, and we need to kind of open our minds to things that we can't see or understand right now, because we're kind of we built those tracks, and we're locked in those tracks, and we need to kind of come off of them. So interesting stuff. All right, so this is an interesting question. What is the difference between a ceremonial dose and microdosing in terms of healing benefits? Because microdosing is becoming more commonplace, but where's the benefits, and what's the line? What line is there between each one?
So they're two different things. Microdosing is more a daily habit. And what I see, number one with microdosing, is it lowers anxiety. So even if you say to me, I'm not an anxious person, we all have anxiety. We're in traffic, we're rushing, we're late on a job. So when that happens, I see clarity, focus, better communication, better sleep. Some people have better energy, but it clears the mind. And in this world today, there's just so much coming at us. It really helps with focus. The ceremonial sessions are what help you release the trauma. So it helps you get to the core of what's making you act a certain way, whether it be addiction, alcohol, if it's PTSD from injury. So that's helping you release the trauma. So they work in two different ways. Some people just microdose. Some people don't do sessions. I encourage both. But yeah, so one's more treating trauma. The other is on it daily, giving you just an incredible amount of focus.
What's the pre experience like? Have you ever talked to someone or met with anyone that wanted to do it, but then after speaking with them, you then considered maybe this is not the right thing for you? Has that ever happened?
Yes, like I do a complete medical evaluation, and I do have some doctors that work with me in case I have a question. If you have bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, some of those more severe issues, manic depression, I will more likely refer you to somewhere like Johns Hopkins, which will do psychedelic sessions with you, but you have to be under pretty strict medical care. So really, I don't want anyone to go into a psychosis, which can happen. So I have to talk to you beforehand, and I'll get a feel for you. You can fill out anything on a paperwork, but yeah, talking to you helps me understand if you're a good fit, and most people are. It can help, most people. But yeah, if there's some severe mental health issues, I will refer out.
Do you ever use microdosing as a vehicle to start someone up on something where they can benefit, and then they can do a ceremonial dose down the road?
Yeah, and that's pretty typical. Some people will be like, I'll never do it, but I'll microdose. And then 3 months later, they're like, I'm ready for a session. So again, it calms and quells the anxiety and kind of opens up their mind, and then they're prepared. So that's very common, very common.
That's awesome. So let's get back. I want to backtrack a little bit, because the last question you answered about the whole making a clinical decision to send someone to Johns Hopkins. Where did you get your training? Because I know you spent some time up in Canada where everything's legal, I guess. But tell us about your training too, because that gives people a comfort feeling to know that you're not just some willy-nilly person saying, I want to start, telling people to do psychedelics because of this, and that. But you've had some extensive training in this, is correct?
Yeah, and that's an excellent question. At first, I started. Well, first I started on myself, going to lots of retreats and going all over the world and doing, personal sessions. Then I started taking courses, and there's a million courses: Berkeley, Imperial College, John Hopkins. Everybody has a certification now. So I regularly do that, and when I started this, I probably did 100 different courses and certifications, and then I spent a lot of time training in person with different shamans, different parts of the world, a lot in Mexico. There's a lot with mushrooms going on in Mexico. I did extensive training in Vancouver. 5-MeO-DMT is legal in Canada. So there's a ton of training up there. I trained with someone, she's called the Dharmacist. She's a pharmacist, which I loved because she really understands the chemical, which you really need to understand with 5-MeO-DMT as far as dosing. So yeah, I've just been all over a lot of, a couple years of hands-on training at retreats and with different practitioners, and then just different certifications and courses. Yeah.
So it's kind of an ongoing thing too, correct?
Yeah,
Yep.
totally ongoing.
Gotcha. Um, how does trauma move during a psychedelic journey? What does release actually look like? And maybe it doesn't happen to everyone, but is there a moment that you see someone releasing those prior thought processes that, kind of have these people locked into that trauma or that anxiety mode?
Yeah, it's different for everyone. Some people are really quiet. You don't really know what's going on. A lot of people cry. It's a big release, crying. Some people yell. Some people talk. I had one woman, probably we were 45 minutes into it. She kind of slid down onto the floor and was like, this is awful. This is hell. This is evil. I don't want to do this anymore. And I was like, well, we've got about 3 hours to go. So I just looked at her, and I don't know what it was, and I just said, if you need to yell, yell. And she started screaming at the top of her lungs for 10 minutes. She stood up. She got back into the bed, laid down, and was so at peace after that. Like, she just released. So it just is different for everyone.
Yeah, I would think it would be very individualistic, because people are, you can go through life and run into a lot of people, and everyone is a bit different. There's really not a lot of people that are just, wow, that person's just like that. Everyone's got their own little quirks and so on, which makes life pretty interesting. Let's talk about, you talked about a few things. You talked about psilocybin, you talk about DMT, and MDMA. Tell us a little about each one of those and the benefits of each one and how you would use each one in regards to a particular client that's coming to you.
I started with mushrooms, and I love mushrooms because I think mushrooms shake you up, loosen you up, and make you very aware of what is going on. So I always like to start with mushrooms. 5-MeO-DMT is considered an ego dissolution, and what I see with 5-MeO is it strips that ego down. So when I say ego, ego is what drives you, what makes your decisions. And what happens after a 5-MeO session, your perception is different. You see things differently. What I noticed personally was things that used to irritate the crap out of me just didn't bother me anymore. I could interpret it and handle things differently. So it's really refreshing to come out of that and be able to not be so controlled by just, we're driven from all our experiences and our past and our trauma. So it's nice to remove some of that. MDMA is something I've recently trained in this past year and have been using. I use it a lot with veterans, PTSD, a lot more with men than women. It's a heart opener. So for some people that are really stuck, it really helps them open up and release. So it's the big one that they use with veterans is the MDMA.
Oh, cool. Any other names for MDMA? Was that
Ecstasy, Molly.
Ecstasy. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I always remember hearing a lot about. I've never done it, but hearing a lot about that with the younger generation, and they just loved the way they felt and they enjoyed themselves,
Yeah.
and that's on the recreational side. But I can see how that could have a very huge effect on someone who is kind of maybe
stuck.
yes, it's hard to, express their emotions and so on. So that would be, that's an interesting, maybe dynamic. Might
Well,
have to consider
especially
that.
men who are taught to be tough, shove
Yeah,
it down, and be the man, and it's very hard to change those. It's very. I get it. Like
yeah.
you're taught a different way, so it's lovely when men come and can really let go and open up. It's really lovely to see.
You hear that, man? Come on, get on board. So now we're going to talk a little bit about an interesting subject, psychedelics and consciousness exploration, which is always a favorite because consciousness is an enigma. I've been doing a lot of not necessarily research. I get because once you start looking at a typical topic, you're going to get barraged with it, and I'm getting some really good stuff. I read something last night about biocentrism, and I read a book on that. And to me, this is the most interesting several paragraphs I've ever read in a long time, and we'll touch on that on another topic. But I think consciousness is interesting because there's no physical proof, physiological proof that consciousness exists. It's something we all have. Is it a human thing? Is it a universal thing? No one knows. Okay, so let's broach this subject and see where it goes. All right. So, in your experience, how do plant medicines expand our sense of self or help us face buried truths?
I think it forces you to open up. It forces you to face something. And believe me, I do a lot of work afterwards with integration where it's a struggle. It's a struggle. People don't want to go back there. Like they don't want to be aware. It's scary. I get that a lot when people come to a session. I'm afraid what's going to come out.
Right.
I'm afraid. So it just expands the. Everyone says to me after a session, I had this fabulous idea, and I just don't understand why I didn't have it before. And I'm like, because there was no space. You were just full. It just kind of removes and opens and expands that opportunity to look at things differently. Some people come for psychedelics not for healing. They come for an idea they're working on that they're kind of stuck. They come for understanding the universe. I mean, some people come for exactly what we're talking about. They're not coming for mental health. They're coming to understand themselves, the world better. Yeah.
Yeah. Because I think as you get older, I mean, when I was younger, I didn't care about mortality. You just lived your life, you enjoyed yourself, et cetera, et cetera. But now as you get older, you start thinking about that because you have to. And it's only human nature that you think about it. But now with psychedelics and all this quantum information, it's very interesting. And when you had just talked about, folks kind of, seeing things differently or they're stuck, I actually get some benefits from cannabis because sometimes I'll smoke or I'll do an edible or whatever, and I get super creative, because I'm creative, and all of a sudden I find something that, wow, this is a great idea, and then I run with it. And then afterwards, when I sober up, for lack of a better word, you still look at it and say, this is a cool idea, and I think it, making people more aware and more open the mind, open the eyes, and see things not the way they are, but how they can be, is kind of an interesting, direction where this stuff will take you, which is
Oh
great.
yeah, and cannabis. If you watch certain shows or look at a can of or whatever case of Ben and Jerry's, you could see where marijuana was involved. I,
Absolutely.
I mean, look at Ben and Jerry's. That was totally done stoned. I mean,
Yeah.
those creations were fabulous, but those were stoned people.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Or
They say
Beavis
this.
and Butthead or any
Yeah.
of that stuff.
They
Yeah.
say the same thing about the '60s when psychedelics came in. The greatest music ever was in the '60s, and these folks were tripping. Even Jefferson Airplane was doing LSD at Woodstock,
Yeah.
and she sang that song. I keep watching that one clip of her singing White Rabbit at that concert, and she was on another planet.
Yeah.
And it was just unbelievable.
Yeah.
So, and even cars, the way they were designed, the Corvettes, and just cool looking cars. People, were experimenting then, and it opened the minds. And now all of a sudden, the '80s come and they start cracking down on drugs, and things start getting a little bit more boring. But I think we're going through a cycle, and I think we're coming back to understanding that these things aren't taboo anymore. These things are beneficial to you as a person, your psyche, your awareness of the world, and where you can go in the world as well, which is important because we all need to live in the present, but you have to have an idea of where you're going, and it gives you a really great perspective that way. So I'm excited about it. This is an interesting, you mentioned this a little bit before. Why is the concept of ego dissolution so central to the psychedelic experience?
Well, I mean, the ego dissolution is very much with 5-MeO DMT. It's very powerful. It's very fast. It just forces you. It just, they call it a near-death experience, which I know you haven't done it yet, but it is. It's almost like going through a white tunnel. It's fast. But when you come out, you just have this renewed feeling, vision, thoughts that you just didn't have before. It just strips it down. It just forces it. I mean, DMT is so powerful. It's pretty amazing. You don't really have a choice. You just don't. Yeah.
Yeah, I've been doing some research on that. It's interesting what some people are seeing, and there's even some consistency what folks see, which is a whole nother topic, and we'll get into that because, like I said, folks, this is a 3-part series, so we're just going to touch on a few things today, and we probably have a few more minutes. But what are some of the most powerful shifts you've seen when someone confronts themselves in a deeper way during a session? I think you answered this a little bit before where the woman just was screaming out. Are there any other particular situations where you experienced something with someone that was coming in for a session that was very different in the way they handled it?
Well, I had someone come for a retreat and go home and divorce his wife, leave his wife. And I said, make sure she knows I had nothing to do with that.
Right.
But it just, obviously it was something on his mind.
Yes.
And a week of doing plant medicine and, meditation and yoga and all that fun stuff, it just made him very aware of his decisions. So I think it can clear your mind when you're maybe confused or trying to make decisions or weighing, what's going to work and what's not going to work. So,
Right.
yeah, I mean, I've seen a lot of people just change some major life things afterwards.
Yeah, I could see that happening for sure. How does this work differ from traditional talk therapy in terms of insight and inner transformation? Because you've probably, you didn't just jump into being this therapist right off the bat. I mean, you probably had some, thought processes, and you're talking to people and you're seeing what their issues are. What was that? What differs between that traditional method and then when someone has a psychedelic experience and thereafter?
Well, I do work with a doctor practice that works with alcohol and addiction and mental health, and they send me all their clients, and they say, we're just sitting here talking about nothing over and over again, and we're getting nowhere. When they come back from you, it's like they've just been thrust ahead, and we have a lot that we can talk about. So it's that comment I made about one session is like 5 years of therapy. It just pushes you so much farther forward. Talk therapy, it works for some people. It doesn't work for some people. This works. I mean,
Right.
you're kind of forced to work and get somewhere because a lot of, I'm not a therapist, but I've done a lot of training because I do a lot of integration work afterwards. It's where I think the hard work is really done. And I think this helps people just organize their thoughts and maybe have a better plan going forward of what's been in the past and where they want to be in the future, as opposed to sometimes just sitting in it and it's the same thing week after week.
Right.
Yeah. Nothing against therapy, but
Right.
it doesn't work always for a lot of people.
How does someone comes in to do psychedelics therapeutically, but then also wants to experience it recreationally? Is there a different mindset for both? Because I understand if I'm going to do a session, I got to have an issue. I got to address that issue, and then do the process and talk more about it. But recreationally, you're kind of just letting the thing take its course.
Yeah, medicinally in sessions, your doses are very high. So if you want to go to a concert and do mushrooms, you're going to do a much lower dose for that. And I have some clients that just blow my mind that they've done so many psychedelics, but they still come to me for the medicinal work. So they're out doing whatever LSD, they're doing tabs, mushrooms, they're having fun, at concerts or in the woods, frolicking or camping, but they still come for that work, that medicinal work. So I tell my clients, do anything you want, just be safe, just know what you're doing. DMT is a harder one. It's so powerful that it's just not something I would recommend people doing on their own. Yeah, it can be dangerous.
I agree. I agree. And I think when you talk about the integration, just talking to someone about your problems is helpful, and if psychedelics kind of bring the veil down and allow you to open up more, you're having a better discussion. Like people go to psychiatrists, but are you really having an open discussion? Probably. I don't know. But maybe psychedelics, you're discovering some real deep seated issues and you're talking to you about it and you're very comfortable. You seem very pleasant. Obviously, I haven't had a session with you, but I'd like to go down that path. But just knowing you and seeing you at a prior workshop and then looking forward to this next one on March 5th, I could see how you can be you're a go-to person. And Denise, much love. I think you're going to be really successful, especially now when all these eyes are starting to open. And what we're doing here at Local Lens at Soundplex Studios is kind of putting a spotlight on folks like Denise Brough, because I think what she brings to the table is very beneficial to individuals and society, and I think we have to look and take a look at fresh approaches to it all, and you're doing that. So I want to thank you for doing what you do, because you're out there, you're pushing the envelope, and that's great. We need people like you to do that, and there's more of you out there that are going down that path, which is great. And I think, traditional medicine, yeah, it has its advantages and benefits, but I think that's not the only solution here, and there's so much more. So we got 2 more episodes we're going to do with Denise, and we're going to do one next month and then the following month. But remember, folks, we have a big event here on March 5th. Denise and I will be up on the stage. We'll welcome you. We'll have some light snacks to give out and some collateral material. But if you really want to learn about this, not that you have to go down this path, but you want to educate yourself on this, this is very important, because it's all about human beings and how we feel and how we act and where our future is going. So get on board, come to the show, and we'll welcome you with open arms, and we'll have a nice discussion. So thank you very much for showing up today. And Denise, thank you. And
thank you, George.
I will see you next month or maybe even sooner.
Yeah.
All right. Bye-bye, folks.
Bye.